You're the only Labour person who really passed muster.
Oh, you might get me cancelled by the comrades, Alex, if you say
That's okay, you can come join the dark side. Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to use this as a perfect segue.
Beautiful.
Because it turns out that Labour would lose 200 seats and almost a third of them to Reform if the election were held today. Now, look, this is no surprise to me. As someone who was eyeball deep in UKIP and looking at the polling and the general election results back in 2015, a third of UKIP votes came from Labour. Again, 2019, essentially when Boris Johnson got all those red wall seats, which Labour then won back, it's because Nigel Farage pretty much, put them in a nice shiny box with a big red ribbon and gave them to Boris Johnson, said, we're not going to stand here. Yeah. Here you go, have them. So unless, you work in politics and haven't been paying attention, anybody in our line of work knows actually that when it comes to what's gone on politically, it's the left behind. It's almost the class system now that the working classes, who were always the Labour vote, are more likely to vote Reform than Conservative, but they did lend their vote to Boris for a while. And now it seems that they're going back to Reform.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the map that this poll produces, it's absolutely extraordinary. You've got a kind of belt that sort of just about starts at the edge of Greater Manchester, but then goes sort of through South Yorkshire, across the sort of north of the Midlands in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, and then, across into Lincolnshire, which massively reflects those places that voted the heaviest to leave. So, I mean, look, I said to the people, I don't think have had their eyes closed on this are those Labour MPs who had, a lot of them had near-death experiences, is how I would put it, in 2019, but survived, as you say, because Nigel stood down candidates, the Brexit Party candidates, and therefore a few people survived. And so what I'm going to say is that Labour is taking Reform very, very seriously in terms of its electoral strategy. Whether Labour's taking Reform sufficiently seriously in terms of its actual policy strategy, I think is another issue.
That's very important, isn't it? Because I say crack on and get on with making your mistakes, but the mistake that seems to be
well,
made...
they're doing that for you, Alex.
Yeah. The mistake that seems to be made repeatedly by politicians, and across the West, actually, because you're seeing this in the Netherlands, you're seeing it in France, is demonise, demonise, demonise. The parties who are standing up and saying about we really need to control our borders, we need to sort of, make what in the 21st century context feel like radical decisions, but 40 years ago it would have just been what the decisions governments were making. It's name calling, it's finger pointing, but in doing that you are alienating and ostracising those voters. It doesn't seem to occur to the wit of the Labour Party or really the Conservative Party, who give it a bit more lip service but then don't deliver, to actually turn around and go, oh, hold on, this is what this huge demographic wants. So shall we just try and do that?
Yeah, I think the key question is what Labour's going to do about immigration, because I think Labour's slightly got the memo on name calling. I think it's slightly looked at both Hillary Clinton and David Cameron. Remember when he called UKIP voters, what was it?
Fruitcakes, lunatics and closet racists.
Exactly.
I remember those days.
I thought you'd have it down to a T. So I think that they kind of got the memo that what you shouldn't do is attack the voters. You shouldn't say that everybody who supports Nigel is a racist, and clearly when the riots happened, although obviously Labour was pretty firm on those who were doing the rioting. Keir did come out and say, just because you've got concerns doesn't mean you're a racist, and made that clear.
When did he say that? When did he make that clear?
He did say that. He said that, and he said it in the conference speech as well.
Right, did he?
So I think they got the memo that you shouldn't demonise the voters, but I think they haven't got the memo that you have to actually do something to address those voters' concerns. So I think that's the issue. So at the moment, I think Labour isn't attacking potential Reform voters. It isn't particularly attacking Nigel and Reform. What I think it is at the moment is sitting back and watching a kind of, blue on turquoise battle. But I think that's a dangerous strategy because actually, I think that the big danger at the next election is, which is what this poll shows, is that you could end up with Labour on I think there's a ceiling below which the Labour vote's hard for it to fall, which is sort of 28, 29, 30. We saw that in 2010 under Gordon Brown. There was a kind of hardcore Labour vote, particularly at the moment when Labour isn't losing too many votes to the left of the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems votes are coming in those posh bits of the home counties where they've got MPs. So they're seen in this poll as keeping most of those MPs that they got, because there are parts of the country which don't want, quite well-off parts of the country, very well-off parts of the country, which are uncomfortable with both Reform and the Tories, but might have traditionally voted Tory.
Well, this is what I always say. The Conservatives need to be looking at what the Liberal Democrats are doing, because I think they actually ended up hemorrhaging more Tory heartland over to Sir Ed Action Man Davey.
Well, in 2015, when I worked for in the 2015 election, when I worked for Ed Miliband, we were, we did the traditional game. We went to all those swing seats in West Midlands, West Yorkshire, Lancashire, and we used to look at where David Cameron was and think, why is he back in the West Country sitting on a hay bale, talking to some farmers? And the reason is because in that election, which is when they went from having the coalition to winning not massive, but a workable majority, they did it by basically obliterating the Liberal Democrats. They basically they had a strategy that was 100% focused on that.
It's very difficult in two-party politics. You move one side and say we want to obliterate the Liberal Democrats, and this flank is then exposed, which are your working class sort of Thatcherite voters.
But some of whom would not be available to the Tories in any place. So that's
right.
Because there are, as you say, there are people who vote Reform who would never vote Tory. And when you just chat to people in those parts of the country, people come in and say, "Oh, I've seen you on the telly. Oh, yeah, I used to be Labour, but I'm now backing Nigel." They'd never vote Tory. They still instinctively and institutionally feel repelled by the Tory party. And of course, Reform comes without all that history.
It's amazing, actually, the number of people who just don't vote at all. That is the real sort of untapped resource when it comes to elections. I mean, you spoke about the riots there and sort of handling of those. And one person who definitely became proxy offended on behalf of the working classes was, of course, Elon Musk.
No irony there, Mr. Trillionaire Elon Musk.
But a man who, frankly, he sleeps on his floor when he works. He's quite a simple human, isn't he? In a not to his brain.
Yes. In terms of his way, his lifestyle.
He might be the richest man on earth, but he's hardly tooling around in a diamond-encrusted Tesla.
No,
he's t-shirt and jeans man, isn't he? He's a geek. But anyway, look, he's got skin in the game. He doesn't like the idea that people be banged up in jail for social media posts because, guess what? He now owns a social media platform. But since Scotland has said, "Oh, come on, Elon, please build a Tesla factory up here, please," and he's just gone, "Really? After the way you lot have spoken about me? I don't think so, love." That's sort of praising what he
absolutely.
said. But basically said few people are willing to invest in Britain under the current Labour government. And speaking to Baroness Claire Fox earlier, she made a very important point, which is, OK, the Labour Party go, we're not inviting Musk to this, fine. We don't necessarily need him as an individual because all these other people have signed up and we did invite them.
This is the investment summit.
The investment summit. But the difficulty, of course, is he's very influential. There are reverberations. When Elon Musk says, "I don't like," other people go, "Well, if he doesn't like, I don't like."
Yes, I think that there's a danger now that Elon Musk was an outlier, and then, of course, now Trump is about to reassume power. I think what you've got is that kind of mainstream business opinion in America is now, doing its best to doff its cap, and I could say ruder things than that, but I won't, at lunchtime, to Trump and his acolytes to try and get back into the favoured circle. So therefore, what Musk says has a sort of trickle-down effect to other business leaders in a way it may not have had before Trump's victory. So I think, look, I think the government is right not to get into a direct row with Musk. It said that it would welcome his investment in Britain. I think it's rather unlikely at the moment.
But why wouldn't they welcome him to the investment summit then?
Well, I'm not sure that he actually had anything to come and deliver at the investment summit, so it was a kind of bit pointless.
Well, the richest man on earth, it was off a
the truth of the matter is he's got his battery plant, which is in Germany. He's trying to extend that, which is controversial in Germany. He's now major row in Germany this week because he did an op-ed for Welt am Sonntag, one of their big Sunday newspapers, saying that Germany was about to be sort of culturally obliterated. I praise thee again, but that it was on the verge of a crisis, and that the AfD is not a far-right organisation. Well, the Domestic Intelligence Service of the Federal Republic don't think that, as they have huge chunks of the AfD under surveillance. I think there's an argument whether you can call Giorgia Meloni in Italy far-right.
I thought the Germans weren't allowed to do surveillance. I thought that was the whole thing since what happened, that they're not allowed to spy on their own people.
There's lots of controls, but they are able to do surveillance. But I think there's a lot more sort of layers they have to go through which proves exactly how many layers they've had to go through to do this. It's not on a whim against AfD. So not only has the comment editor of the newspaper resigned, but the whole of German politics has gone into apoplexy, which is obviously what Musk wants.
Really, the comment editors had to resign?
Yeah, she was. It was obviously forced onto her by the owners, by the actual Springer company, the big sort of German equivalent of Mr. Murdoch.
Kind of pops up what Elon Musk sort of says, really, isn't it? Which is there is no free speech. I want to voice an opinion. You don't have to agree with it. I'm the richest and most powerful man on earth. This is the opinion.
And now all the mainstream political leaders have reacted. So not only the Greens and the SPD, the socialists, as you'd expect, but also the leader of the Christian Democrats, the Conservatives, who's expected almost certainly will top the poll. He's also said it was wrong to publish it. So, that's what's happening in Germany, where they've got this massive factory and the possibility of an extension. So he's getting even less. He's persona non grata in Germany. So he's running out of countries where he's welcome.
I doubt he's run. I doubt he is at all. I think he's probably very welcome in lots of places. Let's speak now about... we've had a bit of a... not a fiery debate, a sort of a strong-worded conversation with Dave in London just before you came in. And Dave was sort of saying that we've got to stop bashing young people for not working. The problem is, where do they go and work? You know, so many jobs are being given over to migrants these days. But we do have an issue with young people who say they don't want to go to work because of anxiety, because of mental health issues. And what do you think is the right approach there? Because clearly, I think it seems that the softly approach of, well, you're having a bad time, you've got a mental health crisis, so take some time, give yourself some space, put yourself first. I think this is where we've gone wrong. I actually think when it comes to sort of, all the people going to speak to therapists, the me first mantra is kind of the problem here. That strife and struggle is a lot better for mental health than instant gratification.
Yeah, I think that, look, clearly what's happened is the new figures out today indicate that the number of 16 to 24-year-olds staying at home to look after families, women doing that, has basically halved. I think it's over about a decade, whereas the number of people in the same age group who can't work, who aren't in the labour market because of ill health, has skyrocketed, and most of that is down to mental health. I mean, I think we need to have a genuine and grown-up national conversation about this, where we don't stigmatise, as Dave said, we don't stigmatise young people, but we do have a conversation about why they're not entering the labour market, and what support is needed for them. Because what worries me is actually for them is that if people have anxiety, and I think we've lived through the pandemic, and it's been a very strange few years for young people. These are the young people who were, what are we now, 3-4 years out from the pandemic, so these are sort of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, so they were kind of right in the heart of their secondary education when the pandemic struck. I think it has been a very strange time. That doesn't mean that we can write off hundreds of thousands of people. We can't do that because we can't afford, as a country, just to be paying out benefits. We can't afford as a country because, despite everything, and despite migration, we still have in many areas a labour shortage, and we can't do it because we can't write them off in terms of their life chances by saying that they're just going to be stuck at home forever. And obviously all the evidence shows that if you're in work, that is often very helpful to your mental health, although obviously some people have mental health conditions mean they can't work. And I'm worried at the moment that particularly none of us can get a GP appointment, when our arm's falling off. But actually, I did yes, absolutely. So how much support is the NHS giving young people? Is it just sort of saying, sign a piece? Remember in the 80s when, there were...
Not really, because I was under the age of 10. I was born in 1983,
so you're so young, Alex.
I was knocking about in the 80s,
much younger
but
than me.
without...
Well, I'm so old. I was knocking about in the 80s, and the big thing then was, as the country deindustrialised, the sort of big belief then was that doctors in sort of coal mining, steel making areas, they were just signing people off work in their 50s they were signing people off at work because they thought there was never any prospect of them getting work. Is that happening now? Is it because it's the type of work that those people would be getting? So we need a grown-up conversation, because this situation cannot be allowed to carry on.
I think I might have just had a light bulb moment in all of this.
Have we sorted the problem?
Yeah, I did this face earlier.
Which
meant that there was like a thought. Yeah, there was something. It's like sort of something all connected in my head. And about this report, talking about how far fewer women are now staying at home to raise children or even having children. At the same time, worklessness has gone up because of mental health. And these things, I think, are directly connected. And I think that what we have a problem with in society is fear of failure. People who don't want to go to work because they don't think they're going to be good enough. They don't want to change their gender if they're women because they're not going to be attractive enough. I think people don't want to have children because they're scared. you go to Africa, you've got women crouching down in fields having babies, and they're not like, oh, I don't know if I'm up for the job, oh, my life's going to change inexorably if I have these children. They don't even have a clean water supply near them. Here, where you've got, running water, electricity, roofs overheads, people, I'm too scared, I'm not ready for children, I'm not ready to have children. It's this sort of lily-livered weakness, this fear. People don't want to go to a job, anxiety. People don't want to have, start a family, anxiety. We've all got. I think this is a result of things being too easy, but also as a result of everyone demanding too much perfection all the time.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a big question for society is that people now, the sort of imposter syndrome or just, I'm not good enough syndrome is huge. And I think one of the things that the government has done is it has raised the minimum wage for young people, which is controversial with some business owners, not all, but some business owners. So at the moment there are 3 levels of the minimum wage: 16 to 18, 18 to 20. I think it's 21, maybe, and then the sort of the grown-up one. It may kick in a couple of years later. I may need to stand corrected on that. But basically, what they've done is there used to be a huge differential between 16 and 18. Because when the minimum wage came in, everybody said, well, look, 16-year-olds doing holiday jobs, making ice cream cones on the beach is not going to happen because the minimum wage is going to be. So it was kind of stepped in so that people can fall off a cliff. Now that it's being increased, so the gap is now very narrow, actually.
But are there really young people going, I'm going to go work in a pub now, I'm going to earn 2 pence more an hour?
Yeah, it's a bit more. I mean, other figures in front of me, but the gap is now, it's much more like, particularly for the above 18, it's now much more like the main minimum wage, which may mean that people feel that a life in work is better than a life on benefit in terms of the cash they can bring in. That's not a total solution, but I think it's a sensible thing to do. Look, and I think we also need to have a conversation about parenthood, because what we've had is this weird thing is that graduates, because obviously graduates, don't go into the labour market until their early 20s, particularly if people take a year out, etc. now, so 22, 23, and then therefore graduate women are having children a lot later, and that of course seems to be those are the examples that most people see, and therefore I think what you've got is a range of people thinking, I've got to wait till my 20s and 30s, my 30s to have kids.
I think there's something else.
People now think it's weird if you have a kid at 21 or 22.
Yeah.
Almost like a gym. You're too young because you weren't around in the 80s, but a gym slip mum was the phrase when I was growing up.
I think there's something else going on here as well. This is happening all across the developed world. If you look at Japan, their birth rate's plummeted.
Absolutely.
It's happening all across the developed world, and I think it's something to do with the digitisation of life. I can't quite put my finger on how or what, but I think there's something going on where we're less in our own bodies and in the present day. We're becoming dehumanised increasingly because of screens, because of the way we interact. So all the things that once made us human are sort of being dissolved, and I don't know, there's something funny happening.
Yeah, and I think as a society also, just on a more basic level, one of the great actually policy successes is in the 80s and 90s, teenage mums who people under 50,
people
40,
thought that was going to be the big issue, didn't they?
Peter Lilly stood up and sang a little song.
Overrun by teen mums.
Absolutely. And actually what happened is that the rate of teenage pregnancies massively decreased. It was a success because that was the goal that we wanted, was fewer mums at 15, 16. I think maybe then one of the knock-on consequences is we've kind of scared the living daylights out of people about having kids, that they think they don't want to have them at 19, 20, 21.
So people don't want to have them at 40. This is the blimmin' problem.
We're not cheering ourselves up, are we? We've just 2 days left of the year, 36 hours left of this year.